I'm the Science Colloquium Chair. I just wanted to run some announcements by you. So our next Science Colloquium is going to be on October 23rd. That's going to be about NASA citizen science opportunities. There's actually also going to be a MAPS presentation that is about, it's titled How Do Galaxies Breathe, or like Do Galaxies Breathe? So another space type of theme talk. That is next Friday. And then if you're one of my students and you need to grab a little extra credit form from me, make sure you do that, fill that out and give it back to me. Sorry, that's like my personal announcement. And then Denise needs to make an announcement about voting.
Hi, everybody. I am Denise Godbout-Avant, and I'm on the Science Colloquium Committee. And so two things. Number one is, how many of you are registered to vote? Just a little bit of history here. When I went to MJC a gazillion years ago, it's when the 18-year-old got the vote. And I was co-chairman of registering MJC students, fellow MJC students to vote. And so we had a really good turnout. So I'm hoping you guys, it's an important election all the way down the ballot. So if you have not yet registered and want to, after this talk, come over here. I have the form and I'll walk you through how to fill it out and how to send it in. So thank you for that. So now I am going to introduce our speaker, and Emily Jonagan is a fisheries biologist with 7 years of experience in fisheries and freshwater ecology. After receiving her bachelor's degree in environmental science from Xavier University in Ohio, she worked as a fishery technician for Illinois Natural History Survey on the Mississippi River. This is where she really started to develop a passion for studying fish community. And she decided to take her interest to the next level by going to graduate school. She received her master's degree in fisheries and wildlife sciences from Arkansas Tech in 2022, where she studied the genetic impacts of barriers on a highly migratory fish species in the Arkansas River. Before joining FISHBIO, Emily worked on marking and tagging juvenile Chinook salmon and steelhead in Northern California hatchery. In her current role at FISHBIO, she works on various long-term monitoring projects, mainly focusing on conservation efforts for salmon and steelhead populations throughout California. And to me, that sounds like a really interesting career, and I'm sure she's going to have a lot more to talk about that. All yours.
All right. Thank you, Denise, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be at the Science Colloquium. I'm really excited to be here. So my presentation is going to be a little bit two-part. So I'm going to give you kind of an introduction of what we do at FISHBIO and what that is. And then I'll go kind of talk into more about careers in this field and how I ended up here and how, if you're interested, you could end up here. So just to kind of kick it off, let's just go talk about this picture a little bit. This is one of our bigger field efforts that we do at FISHBIO. This is on the North Fork of the Feather River. So up north, kind of near Chico. We have an office out of Chico too. And we are doing what's called backpack electrofishing. So basically you kind of momentarily stun the fish. You can pick them up, put them in buckets, and then we just, we measure them, weigh them. And this is kind of a general biodiversity survey. So it's kind of just a sample of what we do, but we do a whole bunch of different work, which I will get into soon. So Denise kind of already went through my intro. So you know most of this now, but yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in environmental science, and then I got, had some experience as a technician. That's kind of what got me into more of the fieldwork aspect. And then I went on to get my master's in Arkansas. I'm from Missouri originally, actually, but I've been in California for almost 3 years now. And I had my first biologist job was with the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission. And that was, we were tagging juvenile salmon and steelhead, well, just marking steelhead. We just clip their adipose fins, so it's a hatchery fish. And that's part of the major salmon and steelhead conservation efforts that are going on in California. So that was all throughout different hatcheries, mostly Northern California. And now I'm a biologist for FISHBIO. So FISHBIO we're a fisheries and environmental consulting firm. So that means we do work for a wide variety of clients. So we will partner with, like local agencies, we'll partner sometimes with the irrigation districts and water districts, and sometimes with the California Fish and Wildlife Department or US Fish and Wildlife. And sometimes just other various private industries as well. But our core kind of pillars are research, monitoring, and conservation. So just to give you a little background of where we work. So a good majority of our work is in California. We have an office, like I said, in Chico. It's kind of a smaller office, but we do have some more projects coming up in that area of the state. So we have an office there, and then Oakdale's kind of our main hub. We're out on Yosemite Avenue. You've maybe seen it over by the by Sconza up there. That's where our boats, and we house like more of our big equipment there. And that's where a lot of our field work is based out of. And then we also have an office basically of one biologist in Laos, or the Lao PDR. And for the work we do there, we kind of work all around Southeast Asia. Some of us will occasionally travel over there. I haven't gone yet, but it's more focused on, we've partnered with agencies like the World Wildlife Fund, setting up fish conservation zones and studying. So there's a lot of kind of rare and endangered species, especially in the Mekong River. And that's where we do a lot of our work there. So just to kind of break down those three pillars, I'll give you kind of some examples of different things we do. So as far as research goes, we have kind of a unique position at FISHBIO. We try to get as much sort of research-oriented projects as we can. We have a pretty good background in publication, and we'll do some kind of long-term studies. So this picture on the top, I guess my left, is one of our biologists with a green sturgeon. So green sturgeon are endangered and are federally threatened in this part of California. So we are tagging that fish, and then basically we'll kind of track its movement throughout the river, and it'll give us more information about where that fish has been or where it's going. The next picture over is from a microscope picture, actually. It's some crayfish claws. They came from the stomach of a bass. So we do stomach content analysis of predator fish, especially in like the San Joaquin River and the Delta. And so that's to see a lot of those predators are non-native. So they've been introduced over the years for sport fishing or accidentally sometimes. And so those fish eat a lot of salmon too. So that's what we're trying to find out, how many, if we're seeing salmon in those diet samples. And then next photo, that is one of our technicians checking a temperature logger. So we will track like water temperatures, because that's another big issue in California as the temperatures get hotter, water temperatures are also an issue because salmon like cold water. And then this photo on the bottom, maybe you've seen it, maybe not. It was actually in National Geographic, which is pretty neat. This was the largest freshwater fish that's ever been caught, I guess. And it is a freshwater stingray. This was in the Mekong River, actually. A local fisherman caught it, and we worked with him, and we were able to tag it. And now we've been tracking its movement for, I think, 3+ years now, and it's still alive and in the river. So that's really neat opportunity for us. And then we'll do some kind of lab-related studies too. So we have done some tested out tags for different companies. So we'll tag fish, we keep them in. We have the aquarium set up, a tank set up. So we'll do studies like that sometimes too. And then monitoring is kind of our main, that's a lot of what we do in the local area. So salmon and steelhead monitoring. So this structure here that goes across the river, it's called a weir. This one's actually located, this is on the Stanislaus River, close to Jacob Myers Park, if you know where that is. And it's goes, all the way across the river, and we have this section here though, where the fish can get through. And so they'll get in there, they'll swim through, and then we have a camera in there that will basically take a silhouette image, and it'll identify it as like a salmon or a steelhead. And then we'll basically be able to get a count of all the adult fish coming back to spawn. And then we also will sometimes close that box, and then we'll check it regularly, and that's when we're trapping fish, so we can try to get like genetic samples and some scale samples occasionally. So that up there is a steelhead that was captured. And if you're not familiar, steelhead are just rainbow trout that go to the ocean. So that's a really cool fish that we have here that are native. So they'll go to the ocean like salmon and then come back and spawn. And they can sometimes go multiple times, where salmon just come back once and they die. And then so for juvenile monitoring, we'll monitor juvenile salmon. So those are kind of all the different stages up there of the salmon life cycle that we caught in what's called a rotary screw trap. So that's this trap right here. So basically it's set out in the river, the current spins it, and fish will get kind of funneled to the back, and then we check it regularly. Sometimes we'll even monitor it overnight, because if the flow comes up really high, then more debris is going to get in there and we have to clean it out. So we'll count the fish, measure them, and then return them back to the river. And then that's an adult salmon there that we caught at the weir when we were trapping. And then so finally, conservation, all of our work has sort of keeping that conservation aspect in mind. Especially here in California, salmon and steelhead they have a lot of obstacles to face. They have, dams have blocked off a lot of their historic habitat, and we've got changing climate and drier years. So, like these two photos here, that's us doing some red surveys, looking for salmon spawning activity basically. And then we do snorkel surveys in the summer to see look for juvenile trout and salmon that are exiting the river. So we'll count them that way. And then that image at the top with the sign that's setting up one of those fish conservation zones along the Mekong River. So that was some of our work in Southeast Asia. That's our biologist who lives in Laos at the bottom of St. Sinsamut, and he does a lot of that work there. And then we also do a lot of the species we work with are usually sensitive or endangered. So we do, in the Salinas Lagoon, we'll do seining to look for tidewater goby, which are threatened in the state. So, and then we'll do, just to kind of spread the message and raise more awareness about these kinds of things, we do a lot of outreach activities too. So we'll do like classroom ag days, or if you heard of the Knights Ferry Salmon Festival, we'll have a booth at that, just to try to do more outreach and, tell people that salmon are in your backyard. It's kind of crazy. You never think about it, but they're here. So why fisheries? Kind of shifting into why you might choose this career, or why I chose this career. It's an opportunity if you choose to stay local, to learn more about your local ecosystem, where you grew up and where you want to be, which I think is really important to have that background. And then you can also kind of contribute then to those local ecosystems and conserving our resources and our fish and organisms. So you can kind of make a difference by studying those species. And then it's a really great opportunity to connect with a really interesting community. There's always like conferences and opportunities to meet new people, see what fish are doing in other parts of the world and see who's studying them. And then if you're an outdoors person, I just put this in there for me because I like being outdoors. It's an opportunity to do that too. You work a lot outside. So some skills you might want to kind of have in your toolbox. It's good to have a well-rounded science and math background. I know math was a little bit harder for me, but I made it through. I know some of us might feel the same way about math. But yeah, getting that solid background and putting in the work for those math and science classes will really help you out if this is a career you want. Strong communication skills. So, not just writing or giving presentations, but communicating with others too. So being able to work well with others, really important. This is a job where there are some desk kind of type activities, but when you're out in the field, you're usually with a partner and you want to, you have each other's safety in mind. And there's a lot of communication goes into that. You might want to consider if you kind of want to continue like moving up in this role, going to college or getting a degree or training, possibly graduate school, not necessary for all roles. That's kind of, if you want to take it a step further and do some extra research, if you're really interested in the research side of things, or some people will even go get a PhD if they want to teach or do like a long-term research with a university. And then just get as much kind of experience as you can. Research with, if you have the opportunity to work with a professor here, or if you want, see someone's looking for volunteers, and if it's not even, exactly related to what you want to do, it doesn't hurt to try. There's lots of internships, especially in fisheries. There are a lot of seasonal jobs that will come up. And I can kind of at the end talk about some like job boards and resources to look for those kinds of things. So this is just kind of an example of possible majors, but there are really a lot of options when it comes to this. You don't have to major or start out just in, just fisheries. I know a lot of people that did just do, just biology, and then they said, oh, I really want to get into fisheries. And then they still have the, the science background that helped them with that. But there's, ecology and environmental science is what I did as my bachelor's degree. There's a whole, list of things you can get into. But these are all kind of good options. And then there's kind of within fishery science, there's kind of a lot of roles you can choose from, and sometimes you'll end up doing a little bit of everything. But to give an example, at FISHBIO, we also have, and we may be kind of unique in this, but I know there are other companies that do this as well, and having like fabrication or even construction experience can be really useful. And we have a whole fabrication team that's working on repairing those traps when we need them repaired, or sometimes we get work that's just building a whole device or equipment for other companies that are monitoring for fish. We actually built one of those weirs in Norway and put it in a river there because they're trying to exclude invasive salmon that don't belong there. There's pink salmon and Atlantic salmon. So we have a team that does that, and then there's you can have a job if you actually prefer to be indoors and, too many bugs, too much heat. I totally get that sometimes. There's more of the data-oriented jobs. We have like statisticians or where you're doing a lot more data analysis, and some people may find that like really rewarding, and you still get to learn about fish and your local environment. And then we have more of the like field-oriented jobs. So a lot of like our technicians will be out in the field a lot of the time, or some of our biologists kind of do a little bit of both. So there's kind of a lot of places where you can fit in the fisheries world. But like I said, you'll kind of end up doing a little bit of everything. You will have to, you might expect to be in some challenging environments and elements. Sometimes night shifts, sometimes early morning shifts, could be out in the rain, could be out in the heat. So that's something to kind of consider. Sometimes there's like, some heavy labor involved, just kind of depends on the day. But you can also get some really cool networking and travel opportunities. There's conferences, or with FishBio, like I said, we kind of have had jobs all over. mainly in California, but there's opportunities for sure. And it can kind of, if you decide you aren't into fish, maybe, we do a little bit of wildlife surveys as well. So we'll do like nesting bird surveys or pre-construction surveys to look for sensitive species. So that could be reptiles or birds, mammals, kind of covers everything. So if you decide, oh, maybe I want to branch out into more of the wildlife side, it can be a good foot in the door for that. So, who might hire you? There's a lot of options here. So like FISHBIO is the environmental consulting agents industry. So there are a lot of different consulting firms, small, big, we're kind of on the smaller end. We have about 30 people, but it's an interesting way to you can work for a variety of clients. You can meet a lot of new people that way and kind of decide if this is something you want to continue with. And then there are a lot of government jobs, so state and local municipalities. I know a lot of East Bay municipality, they hire a lot of fisheries people, and you can sort of work on monitoring usually kind of projects like that statewide, and then get to know the local fish. That's a great avenue also. There's other private organizations like TID, for example, has a fisheries biologist. A lot of with these, they have their own teams, but sometimes it's just one or two biologists. So that might be a kind of a more competitive route, but it's definitely an option and something to consider when you're looking for jobs. There's federal government jobs. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they kind of have a big, and same with the state, Fish and Game, they have a policy side where there are a lot of people who work on policies and permitting, if that was something you're interested in. And then they also do the field research and monitoring. And there's a lot of federal organizations. So you've probably heard the Forestry Service will hire fisheries biologists, the Bureau of Reclamation. There are a lot more ways to get in with the federal government. There's also nonprofits, or sometimes I hear NGOs. They will that's a neat route to go. They collaborate with a variety of organizations. California Trout is one example. They just got to help out with the Klamath Dam removals, if you heard about that. It's pretty historic. They removed 4 dams on the Klamath River, and I heard recently there were salmon spotted in the river past where they've never been able to go for 100 years. So that's really neat. And there are a lot of organizations too, like Trout Unlimited is also one. And I have River Partners, if you've heard of them. They do a lot of restoration work, habitat restoration, and then academia. So like I mentioned earlier, if you want to kind of further your education, this might be, and you like teaching or you like doing kind of full-time research, that might be the path for you. So you can conduct research on fisheries, and then you can even have students that you work with. So there's a lot of different paths to go. Just some general advice here. So you want to make sure you identify your interests. Every job is going to have probably some part that you are not a fan of, unfortunately. It's some people do find that perfect job, and that's great. But kind of weighing out what would be your ideal job and where do you see yourself? You get that question, 5 years, 10 years. So that's something to really think about. And so you want to identify what are your strong suits, what are your strong skills, and then again, and then get into math and science. Take as many as you can, the basic math. I would say statistics for this kind of job is probably your most important, I would say. It's good to have some of that calculus and algebra background, but we use a lot of statistics, doing data analysis and reporting to clients, or when we do publications. And then your computer and writing skills are also really valuable. Writing, I would say, especially in being able to write for different audiences. So, at FISHBIO, we have it's kind of like a blog, we call it the Fish Report. And so we'll all kind of take turns. We will write, a couple of those, and it's supposed to be kind of written for like a broader audience instead of, just a, heavy like science publication. It's kind of a little bit in between. So being able to write for different audiences is really important. And like I said, all jobs are going to have, pros and cons. So you've just got to kind of figure out what's important for you, and just try to have an open mind. That kind of brings me in to the next slide. So yeah, that's what, with specializing in something, it's good to keep your options open. If you are like, I really like salmon, and that's like me, like I love salmon. That's kind of part of why I came to California, because I wanted to work with salmon, but I've ended up working with a lot of different fish and even non-fish animals, and I've really liked it. So just keeping your options open. If a lot of people will say, I want to work with sport fish, or, they forget about we have a lot of cool other native fish in California too that aren't just salmon. And so, yeah, it goes along with that, explore. One experience might change, your career path, or you might discover an interest you never knew about before. So, going to talks like these, or just talking to professors that you might not see on a daily basis, you might learn something new. And then, yeah, volunteer experiences, even like they'll do like river cleanups and things like that, where you can meet people that are in this kind of world, or, this isn't really volunteering, but going to career fairs and things like that. Just try to put yourself out there. And especially with, fisheries, if there's internships or a seasonal job, that's a good way to test out if this is something that you would like. And then, yeah, just be persistent. If this is what you want to do, I know it's hard sometimes, but just picking up the phone and calling, if you want to work somewhere, if you want to learn more about it, that really stands out to people that are hiring too, if you reach out like directly. And as a shameless plug here, we are hiring. So we're looking for technician positions right now. So put this announcement up here, and I also have a QR code to it on the next slide. But so you can call us, stop by the Oakdale office, and yeah, I am left a good amount of time for questions. So it's questions, or and I'll hang out too after if you have general questions about careers or things like that. Yeah.
So you
sorry.
mentioned that when you first started call, I'm assuming did you know you wanted to go into fish biology, or did you take a class, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I didn't really talk about that, but so in undergrad, I knew I was interested in biology and more kind of the environment side. Didn't know exactly what though. And I had a internship my junior year summer position where we did a research project on the Ohio River. And that was, we were sampling fish, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought I'd like to continue. Yeah.
I know you mentioned there was volunteer
Mhm.
opportunities, but my question would be, the average pay someone would get if they were to work, starting for a year.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So she was asking about average pay for starting out in this field. So most people, it kind of depends on what experience you have already, but if you're going into a technician role, which would say is more of the entry level role, in California right now, I would say that, the average ranges from $19 an hour to 23. And then the, biologist roles go up a little more from that, but it also kind of depends. I just saw, I think it was US Fish and Wildlife posted a entry-level biologist role for 24 an hour. And that was, and it kind of depends on where you are too, in the state, because I know, like in the Bay Area, it'll pay a little bit more and things like that. Yeah. Yeah. Right here.
Congratulations, I love your presentation.
Thank you.
I was wondering, about the funnel, that machine that you.
Yeah.
showed us.
Yeah.
What do you call it first? And what?
Yes.
Questions do you answer with that?
Oops. Let me see how to get back. Sorry, I lost my mouse. There we go. Yeah, so she asked about the funnel. It's called a rotary screw trap. That's a pretty commonly used trap, especially in California. And so the actual funnel part stays in the river. And if we're not catching fish, or if we have to, sometimes we'll raise it up. There's a kind of cable where we can raise the cone up so we won't catch fish. And that's if, the flow is going to come up really high and we know it's just not going to be safe for the fish or for us, for that matter, we'll raise the trap. But yeah, the way it works is that fish, it works best for, smaller juvenile salmon, because once they get bigger, they can avoid it a lot easier. But the current will kind of draw them in there, and then they just get kind of funneled to the back. And then there's a live well there, which those two technicians there, they're checking it there. So they open up that, and that's where the fish will be in there, and they're swimming in there. And yep. Yeah, so she's asking what, to answer the part of why we have these traps is to study juvenile production, basically. So how many, and they're staged along. So we operate 3 different screw traps, and then there are other agencies that will operate screw traps further down the river. And it's kind of to see how many salmon are making it out to the ocean, the juvenile fish, when they're swimming out. Yeah. Yeah. No problem. Yeah, in the back.
Like, I think a fishery.
Mhm.
I don't recall what they said, the reason why they did have them. Are they like, why do they have like fisheries? What are they doing with fish? Raising them to rivers or?
Yeah, I think, so you're talking about hatcheries. Yeah. So she's, oh yeah, you're good. So she's asking, why do we have hatcheries? So in California, there are what's called conservation hatcheries. There are also a lot of other fish hatcheries that can be for commercial or other reasons, but we have the conservation hatcheries that are meant to basically supplement the population, because salmon have been kind of in decline recently. Even like you may have heard, for this year and the previous year, they had to close the ocean commercial fishing season for salmon because they've been in decline. So it's kind of a way to help support the salmon and try to bring their numbers up. So they'll raise them up till they're about, I guess we call it like par size. So it'd be that biggest fish there in that picture. And then they'll release them. And some hatcheries will try to actually release them closer to, they'll release them straight into the San Francisco Bay. So they don't have to try to navigate the river and the predators that are there. But there's also predators in the ocean. So it's kind of, doing their best though. Yeah.
That doesn't hurt their sense of direction.
It does a little bit actually sometimes. So the thing with salmon is that they use their basically like their sense of smell, and then they have kind of a navigation compass in there. They to get them back to where they were born. So with the hatchery, sometimes they can still imprint on that scent, and it's enough time where they can figure out their way back. One of the bigger issues is the delta now, like the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta parts of it have gotten cut off or diverted, and so sometimes salmon do stray. We've caught a lot of hatchery fish in like the Stanislaus and Tuolumne rivers, which don't have hatcheries on them. So we think they're probably coming from the McColmney River. They do stray sometimes. They'll usually still, They can still find a place to spawn, but it is an issue.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so yeah, I didn't quite go into that picture, but that's kind of the juvenile stages. So the smallest one there, he's still got, you can see like the yellow, that's their egg sac. They're called Alvin, Alevin. So yeah, those are when they still are really small. They are still kind of like consuming that egg for their main source of food. And then we have fry, which is the next size up. So it's like when I do like the classroom presentations, it's like the size of your pinky. And then you'll have par, or which these are kind of in between. That's kind of a smaller par, but and then you have smolt. And smolt is when they start to lose those. You can see those stripes they have on the side, and they'll start to lose those. They become more silvery. It's kind of when they're getting ready to go to the ocean. Yeah. Yeah.
What's your favorite kind of fish?
Favorite kind of fish? That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I like salmon, of course, and steelhead. Steelhead are really interesting to me just because they have kind of a different life cycle. They're kind of, they're like a trout, but they're like a salmon. And back in Missouri, where I'm from, I also got to work with gar. I don't know if people are familiar. There's like alligator gar. We didn't have as many alligator gar there, but we had long-nosed gar. They're really cool, like prehistoric looking fish, and they actually are from like prehistoric times. So that's another favorite. Yeah. Yeah.
How exactly you tag the fish?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There are different types of tags. So in the hatchery, when I was tagging fish, those are what are called coated wire tags. And they're just a little like tiny piece of wire, and they have a microscopic, I should have put a picture in here, but they have like a code that's written on the wire that you can only see under a microscope, but it links it back to that hatchery. So when that fish comes back, hopefully to spawn, and when it dies, you can get the tag back and see where it came from. And then we use something else called pit tags. Those are actually the same kind of tags that like are in your pets, like microchips. We'll use those, and then we have antennas at different spots in the river, and it'll just detect them going through, and we can download that data to look at where the fish have been moving. And then there's also acoustic tags, which are a little more involved. That's actually what we used for that sturgeon, and they have to get like surgically implanted. And then we'll go out with, there's either receivers in the river to see where they go, or you can go out and try to detect them with a receiver. But we mainly use pit tags for work. Yeah, another question? Mhm.
Yeah.
I'll hear you.
Is there a verbal presentation?
Sure.
FISHBIO main guidance. What's their function?
Yeah. So yeah, she asked who our main clients are. So I guess, for the monitoring programs, most of those are funded by we have Oakdale Irrigation District, Modesto Irrigation District, and Turlock Irrigation District. So they fund most of the rotary screw traps and the weirs. And then we'll also work. So on the Stanislaus weir, we specifically are looking for steelhead. That's like our steelhead monitoring weir. And that's funded partially by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. But yeah, we have a wide variety. We've done work for PG&E as well. That's more up north, and more like monitoring and biodiversity surveys, like that first picture on the slide that showed. I think who else? We've worked, and sometimes we also kind of subcontract with other people. But like Cal Trout, we've worked with them too, California Trout. Yeah. But a lot of the funding comes from the bigger companies because they have to stay in compliance with certain like water regulations. So we're part of that, making sure that the fish are still doing well and that, not taking too much water from the river and things like that. Yeah.
About taking water.
Mm-hmm.
Did you in the environment study?
We did a publication on, it was actually on the Stanislaus River because they do environmental flows for fish. So they'll release like certain pulse flows at like usually around this time of the year, actually when fish are coming up to kind of help the salmon have, more flow in the water. But when we do kind of water quality studies, it's more, we'll, daily with our monitoring, we'll do, dissolved oxygen and we keep track of that kind of stuff, but we haven't done like a bigger study on it. Yeah, she asked how many people will typically go out in the field. So it's usually a team of two, especially like for screw traps. Sometimes it's 4, depending on how much work's involved. Especially like for those larger field efforts, like where you have to electrofish like across a whole river, that can be like 15 people. Yeah. Right. Yeah, but usually at least 2 people. Yeah. Any other questions or?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
After the salmon festival,
Yeah.
after that nice ferry outside.